Hello everyone, and welcome to this session hosted by the NLP stream at ACE. At ACE, we not only cover the latest trending research papers in the field, we also cover classic research works that have played a significant part in shaping our field. In NLP, we have covered quite a few classic papers already, and you can watch those videos on our website AI.SCIENCE. But there are still a bucket load of iconic NLP papers that we haven't gotten around to yet. So, to improve our coverage in this area, we have started a classic paper discussion series, and this is going to be the first session of it. So, our speaker today is Nusinovich, and he will be speaking about an iconic paper by Colbert and Weston. The paper's title is A Unified Architecture for Natural Language Processing, Deep Neural Networks for MultiTask Learning. So this paper was actually released in 2008, and just by the title, you can see that it was way ahead of its time. It was 4 years before AlexNet was released, which is when one would say the deep learning revolution became mainstream. This paper is also a precursor to another legendary paper by the same authors called Natural Language Processing, Almost from Scratch. This paper was published in 2011. We hope to cover that paper as part of this series as well sometime in the future. This paper inspired advances in word embeddings, language modeling, multitask learning, among others, and Jan is going to elaborate the paper's contributions in detail. So a short note to the audience. Jan is going to give a short presentation, and after the presentation, we'll open the floor for discussion. So you can ask your questions during the discussion session. But if it is an urgent clarification question, then you can ask it during the presentation. Jan has also implemented this paper and has made the code available online. So we'll have a short code walkthrough of the paper later in this session. So over to you, Jan. And maybe I would like to start by asking you what made you choose this paper as the first paper in this series?
Of course. Just to clarify, I didn't implement the entire paper, just some of the tasks that they worked on, just as an example to make it accessible. In terms of what made me choose the paper, so I'll get more into it, but I took a data science immersive bootcamp at General Assembly. And we covered the basics to get into the field of data science, including basics of NLP. But some of the different aspects we didn't focus on as much. And multitask learning in general, and specifically multitask learning with NLP, was one of those aspects that we didn't cover. And then when I learned about this paper, I learned that it's influential. It is still being cited, and it's a type of, in our boot camp we did transfer learning, but we didn't do multitask learning. So it's a type of neural network that I hadn't worked on before. So I wanted to try it out, and I wanted to make it accessible to other folks who are getting into NLP. So hi everyone, welcome, and thank you for coming to this talk. My name is Jan Nusinovich. This is the first talk in my classic papers in NLP stream at AI Socratic Circles, ACE. I work as a data scientist for an alternative energy finance company called New Energy Risk. In my previous career, I worked as an environmental engineer. I had a master's in civil and environmental and a bachelor's in chemistry. And then I switched into data science when I took a data science immersive bootcamp at General Assembly last spring, and then started working in the field. I became interested in natural language processing when I created a travel photograph caption generator for my capstone project. And kind of in creating that, I saw that there was so much more to learn. I decided to make this stream, as I had mentioned, to make NLP more accessible to folks switching into the field, or just folks wanting a good overview. So I'll start with an outline. So Since this is the first talk in the classic papers in NLP stream, I'll quickly go over what some of these classic papers are. If you're interested, I invite you to present on any of them, especially if ACE doesn't yet have a presentation on that paper. Please feel free to contact me. My contact information will get to at the end. After that, I'll go over the paper that's the focus of this talk, which is called A Unified Architecture for Natural Language Processing, Deep Neural Networks, and MultiTask Learning by Ronan Colbert and Jason Weston from 2008. In order to help folks understand the paper better, I created a quick implementation of several of the tasks in the paper, which I'll present, and hopefully that'll inspire you to delve into multitask learning with NLP further. And I'll finish off with references, acknowledgements, and then my contact information. And by the way, throughout, I'll be using, some of the time I'll be using MTL as an abbreviation for multitask learning and NLP for natural language processing. So don't let that throw you off. And feel free to ask in the chat if you don't know what something means. So starting off with the classic papers. There was sentiment analysis from 2002. It was using natural language processing to interpret and classify emotions in text. It was Blue from 2002, which was the bilingual evaluation understudy. It was a method of evaluating translations. It was quick and expensive and language independent. There was the multitask learning paper from 2008, and that's the focus of this talk. And that was a convolutional neural network architecture that, given a sentence, outputs different language processing predictions. In terms of, in the current day, sentiment analysis is still used. Blue is being replaced by newer methods of evaluation, and multitask learning is still relevant, which we'll talk about more. Let's see. Word to Vec from 2013. That was converting text into vectors, either predicting a word based on the context word that surrounds it, or predicting context words based on a word. There was the Glove paper from 2014. It's an unsupervised learning algorithm for obtaining vector representations for words, where the distance between the two word vectors provides a method for measuring the linguistic or semantic similarity of the corresponding words. Keep in mind they're individual words. It doesn't look at the words around them, just word vectors for single words. These papers are both still relevant. ACE already has a presentation on word to Vec. I use the Glove word embedding in my code in a few slides for how I worked out some of the tasks in this paper. Next, we have RNN encoder decoders from 2014. One RNN encodes a sequence of symbols into fixed length vector representation, and then the other decodes the representation to another sequence of symbols. It became the standard approach for neural machine translation and sequence to sequence prediction, and other types of sequence to sequence prediction. Then there was neural Turing machines from 2014, which extended the capabilities of neural networks by coupling them to external memory. Both of these papers are still relevant, and one could cover them for ACE. Then there was attention from 2014. It was a mechanism. It was a mechanism in a recurrent neural network, allowing it to focus on certain parts of the input sequence when predicting certain parts of the output sequence. There was OMFIT from 2015. It's a language model that's used to improve performance on downstream NLP tasks. And there was Transformers from 2017, which used self-attention to process an entire sequence in parallel and relate words to each other. And it's used instead of the RNN from the attention paper. ACE already has presentations on attention and Transformers, but not OMFIT yet. So last slide here in the classic papers overview. There was Elmo from 2018, which creates a language model using bidirectional character-based contextual word embeddings. BERT also from 2018, which is based on like parts of words instead of words or characters, and it uses transformer encoder blocks to create a language model. And then there was GPT-2 and GPT-3. You may have heard of them in the news. GPT-2 uses transformer decoder blocks trained on a massive data set to create a language model, and GPT-3 uses even a larger training data set and transformer encoder and decoders to create a language model. These are in the news because their potential to create lots of fake text, fake news, things like that. ASR already has presentations on Elmo, BERT, and GPT-2. So next I'll switch gears to the paper at the heart of this talk, called, as I mentioned, A Unified Architecture for Natural Language Processing, Deep Neural Networks with MultiTask Learning. So just a quick overview. The model was jointly trained on 6 tasks, part of speech tagging, for example, noun, plural, singular noun, plural noun, adverb, adjective, etc. It was a little more fine-grained than that, but it explains all the different parts of speech on my GitHub. Was trained on chunking, which is labeling segments of a sentence with syntactic constituents, such as noun or verb phrase, and each was encoded as, the words within them were encoded as beginning chunks, like beginning noun phrase, or inside chunks, like inside noun phrase for the subsequent ones. And then it's trained on named entity recognition, including categories like person, company, or location. Was trained on semantic role labeling, such as labeling the subject, the predicate, and the sentence, and the parts of the sentence. It used it used a language model. In the case of this paper, the language model was used to predict whether the input sentence makes sense, and then lastly, it was trained on semantically related words, which predicted whether 2 words are synonyms. The main interest of the paper of the authors was the semantic role labeling, since they said it was the most complex of these tasks. The language model was semi-supervised, since it was trained on unlabeled text from Wikipedia, and then it helped the supervised tasks, and the rest of its tasks were supervised. The multitask learning and semi-supervised learning improved the generalization of the shared tasks, resulting in state-of-the-art performance for the time. And then the paper also spearheaded ideas like pre-training word embeddings and using convolutional neural networks for text. So this was the diagram from the paper of the architecture. The first layer extracted features for each word. The second layer extracted features from the sentence, treating as a sequence. The following layers were classical neural network layers, and then the neural network outputted class probabilities for each word for all the tasks. So now onto my code. So I coded a quick beginner-friendly implementation of the first 3 tasks in the paper, roughly speaking. Part of speech, chunking, and named entity recognition, just to help make the concepts understandable. I used a labeled data set of news headlines that I found on Kaggle to create my training and validation data. And then I added beginner-friendly instructions for how to download the data, download the code, set up the environment, train the model, and run it. And if you're new to, say, neural networks in general, it would be a good exercise to go through the instructions, and you'll learn a lot about training, about environments, and everything. So this is the link here. And can you guys see the screen? Okay, good. So really, just real quick, I'll go over it. It explains what the code is, what the different linguistic terms are. There's actually a lot more parts of speech than I mentioned, and more named entities. And then the data set I used only had chunks for the named entities and only had beginning or inside. It didn't have the noun phrases and verb phrases, so I just did that part. And then here the instructions explain how to clone the code and download the data and set up the virtual environments, train it, and test it. And then I included references for the code. There wasn't exactly, nobody did exactly this same implementation that I did, but these were just references that I learned from. And then I also included the data source and an explanation of the parts of speech. So if you enjoy the presentation, feel free to look at this and try it out yourself. So here's the architecture that I used for my quick implementation. I used first a glove word embedding, followed by a bidirectional long short-term memory neural network, followed by 3 time-distributed dense layers for the output for the part of speech, the name density recognition, and the chunking. And the validation accuracy for all 3 was around 95%. That was slightly larger than it should be because of the sentence padding. And so I'll give 3 quick examples, test examples with headlines that I found from Google News, from local news. So this one was, you can now get a pad thai sandwich in Toronto. It looks correct, except it misses pad thai as a beginning and inside chunk. So other than that, not too bad. The next example was fast food chain Movies from the Jay and Silent Bob films is coming to Toronto. This also got mostly everything correct, but it misses Jay and Silent Bob films as a whole chunk. Next example, there was Toronto is getting a drive-through winter wonderland with reindeer in a light tunnel. This looked pretty good too, but it confused reindeer. I thought it was a geographical entity, and then it misses the beginning and inside chunk for winter wonderland. And so I'll go on to some further exercises for you if you are interested. So some other things you could do, you could add the other tasks. You could add the semantic role labeling, the language model, and semantically related words. Of course, the semantic role labeling and semantically related words would require additional labeled data. And then the language model should be trained on a data set like Wikipedia. The news headline data set is too small. But if you found that data, it would definitely be doable. You could create a test data set from recent headlines and measure more exact word error rates. You could alter the architecture to try to improve performance. And one thing I definitely want to try, you could try embedding with Elmo or BERT instead of glove vectors, since Elmo or BERT takes into account the context. And then, of course, you could try using multitask learning for your own natural language processing projects. I see a lot of projects with transfer learning and not a lot with multitask learning, but it's still something that can help when there's shared tasks. So these are the references that I used for the papers. This is the first 7 up through 2014, and then this is the next set up through GPT-3 in 2020. And then references for my code are here. For my presentation are here. And then the references for my code are in the GitHub. I really recommend reading this blog of Sebastian Reuter if you're interested. He was the author of the OMFIT paper from 2015, and he's really good about writing about NLP. It's at a more advanced level than this presentation, but if you're interested, it's kind of the next place to go. And then also this GitHub of user Keon was a really good resource. So acknowledgements, huge thank you to AI Socratic Circles. Amir helped me create and organize the stream. Suhas gave me a lot of conceptual help and reviewed my presentation. I really appreciate that. And Sean reviewed my code as it went through different iterations of architecture for my neural network. So I really appreciate that. And thank you guys for being here in the audience too. So my contact information, here's my LinkedIn, my GitHub, and my blog. Please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn or through the ACE Slack if you'd like to present another classic NLP paper. If you're wavering on which one you'd want to present, let me know and we can talk about it. But I invite you all to present. And if you find this presentation on YouTube, if you contact me on LinkedIn and we haven't met yet, please just leave a sentence introducing yourself. Thank you for your attention. Pun definitely intended. I hope this presentation helped you better understand NLP and the history of it. Any questions, comments, complaints?
Great. Thanks, Ian, for the presentation. So